Morning. Try that again. Good morning. I just heard you sing, so you can talk, surely, okay? Hey, I'm Pastor John, PJ, if you want to call me that. I am thankful that you're here this morning. If this is your first time here, that is amazing. We're glad that you are here. So I know that school is starting back. How many college students do we have in the room? Okay, well, welcome back. At least you're halfway finished with the year, right? Anyone graduating this year? Anyone ever going to graduate? Okay. Anyone thinking about dropping classes already? Right? I still remember I graduated from Charlton in a year called 1999. And so, I know, right? And so I remember still being in a history class where I went in that day and everyone walked in and we were there as a large class, and then the professor walked in and about 3/4 of the class got up and walked out, and I stayed, and it was horrible. But I'm joking with that, but you are all here and we're thankful that you are here. And in just a second, I'm not wearing this for any other reason but to make a point. But this is where I'm going to start today. I'm going to start in a message called Reflecting What's Already Yours. And now then you're like, okay, you're going to wear that crazy jacket the entire time? No. But I also want to go ahead and warn you, in just a minute, we're going to totally go dark, kind of like TikTok. That's why you're here. You don't have anything else to do. Okay, thank you. But our Wi-Fi is not that good. But no, we're about to go dark, and there's a reason why. And it involves a flashlight, and it involves this jacket, because there was a long time that I saw Christianity in my journey as a follower of Jesus, even as a pastor, and I hate to confess that, but we're real here, that I saw myself more as a flashlight than a reflector. And it handicaps us in many, many ways as followers of Jesus if we see ourselves like that. We're going to be in John chapter 9. In your little bulletin, you'll see in the back, it says that you are able, please do, read John chapter 9, 1 through 41 throughout the week. If you have questions about this passage, there's a lot of great stuff in here. Please email us at info@timberridgechurch.com, and we will get back to you. Any question that you want to. Anytime you ask a question, it encourages us and as a team to grow too, but we'll get back to you. But I would immerse myself, if I were you, if you wanted to jump into John chapter 9 and just read through it. Find yourself in the sense of who is God, who are these people he's talking to, what am I supposed to do through this? But let's go ahead and jump in the Word. John chapter 9 says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been born blind from birth. Rabbi, and that means teacher, professor, whatever. His disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? Verse 3, it was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the task assigned to us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. Jesus is the light of the world, but now who does he shine through? I need help. Yeah, absolutely. You guys and me, hopefully. Then he spit. I love it. And some of you are going to use this for out of context, and maybe you're dating with someone, or your mom or somebody in your life didn't like you to spit. You're like, look, Jesus spit. I'm just trying to be a follower of Jesus, a good disciple of Jesus. And then he spit on the ground, made mud with saliva, and played with his spit, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed himself, and he came back seeing. His neighbors and others who knew he was as blind a beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said he was, and others said, no, he just looks like him. Guys, do you want to know how powerful it is to be where Jesus wants us to be? He wants us. He wants to confuse people in a sense. When they see us, they're like, there's no way that can be the same person. Do you know who they were before? It just looks like them. They're a doppelganger. I love knowing that word. We all have doppelgangers. You know what a doppelganger is? Okay, a doppelganger is someone that looks like you somewhere on this planet. All right? Just you have a doppelganger. And so this idea that what I love about this is he says, hey, no, it can't be him. It just looks like him. If you're in that place, you're doing great. Look at this. But the beggar kept saying, yes, I'm the same one. Never leave the mindset of being the beggar. As I journeyed through the life of a pastor and minister or whatever, and finally nearing 50, understanding that all the things that I've tried to become, I've missed it. Because that's the most important place to continue to be, is a beggar. And what I mean by that is not thinking of ourselves less, but thinking of ourselves less often. But at the same time, receiving from what Jesus has given us. We'll never arrive to the place of being the one. And if I can stay in the mindset of a beggar and saying the only thing good that comes from me, the only way that I can love my beautiful wife is receiving what God has given to me, not just at salvation, but every day. And I need that. They asked, who healed you? What happened? He told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, go to the pool and wash yourself. So he went and washed, and now I can see. Where is he now? They asked. I don't know. Then they took the man who had been blind to the Pharisees, because it was on that Sabbath that Jesus had made the mud and revealed him. The Pharisees asked the man all about it. So he told them, he put mud over my eyes, and when he washed it away, I could see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man Jesus is not from God, for he is working on the Sabbath. Others said, but how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was a deep division among them. Okay. His parents replied, we know this is our son that has been born blind, but we don't know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him, is he old enough to speak for himself? Look at this. His parents said this because they were afraid of Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone Jesus said was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. That was why he said he is old enough. Ask him. But what did he do? They asked. How did he heal you? Look, the man exclaimed. I told you once. Don't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? I love this. Do you want to be his disciples too? That was a cut, and he didn't even know he was cutting. 28. Then he cursed him. Then they cursed him and said, you are his disciple, but we are the disciple of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from. You were born a total sinner, the Pharisees told him. They answered, are you trying to teach us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. What a story. And I want to give you some back stories on this. A Pharisee is someone who worked hard in fulfilling the Torah. More than the 10 commandments, the 613 commandments. And they made laws to protect themselves from breaking laws. And one of the things that they're saying in here, the reason you have such a pursuit of trying to find out what is going on, 5th and 6th graders, if you have not gone to this room yet, I forget that all the time, you can go to the connections room. So if you're a 5th and 6th grader in this room, you can come down and you can go out this door. There's someone, I promise parents, there's someone waiting back here for you. You can go through the back or through the front. I do apologize for that. I forget it every Sunday. But what was going on here is the reason they were trying to research this is there were 3 messianic miracles. And what I mean is saying that this miracle, only the Messiah could do this. So the teachers of the law knew, hey, the Messiah has shown up when he's done 3 miracles that man cannot do. And one of them was giving blind, not just blind, or sight to the blind, but giving sight to the person that's been born blind. So that's what they're doing. Another crazy cool thing is we see that Jesus spits and he makes mud. There's several thoughts about the reason he did this. He did it on a Sabbath. And so he was healing on the Sabbath, and they said, you can't heal on the Sabbath because you're working. We're not supposed to work. We're supposed to keep it holy. Not only did he work in the Sabbath in the law, it said this, it was against the law to knead bread. And so what Jesus was doing in making and playing with this dirt, he was showing the religious that it's not about a bunch of rules. It's about a relationship. It's not about trying to fulfill all these things and be perfect and then you can be used. It's just about the relationship and showing up and realizing that you're a beggar, realizing you're in need, not trying to question or live in this box of Christianity that doesn't exist. It's about relationship. So I want to talk about today, what does it look like for us to reflect Jesus? Our verse for 2025 is this. This is what the scriptures mean when they say, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. I want to read that again. This is what the scriptures mean when they say, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. The Bible is where you find it out, but living amongst one another. We can't isolate ourselves as followers of Jesus. It's important for us to understand that we need to live out the Bible with one another, because this is when we're able to see what this God and who this God is and how he loves us. Acts 4:20 says this, we can't stop telling about everything we have seen and heard. What do you talk about? If you spend time with me, I'm going to talk. I love marriage counseling. I love my wife. I think she is more beautiful today than she was a few years ago. And truly, we're best friends. We are best friends, and it just we enjoy being with each other. So what do you talk about? What do you find yourself talking about? The reason we talk about surface things is because they create areas of safety in our lives where when any types of insecurity seeps in, we run. But what do you talk about? Do you talk about Jesus? In this last week, what did you talk about? I know what people aren't talking about today. The Texas Longhorns. The Detroit Lions, TikTok. No, people are actually talking about that. But there's a lot of things people are talking about. Are you talking about Jesus? I'm going to give us 6 things to think about as we reflect Jesus, hopefully, in our everyday, in our every life. Can I give you a little insight in what it is to be this person, maybe? I was back in the office right before when worship started, and I was hearing it, and I was walking out, and I saw my son's Bible. And I opened it, and I saw some of the highlighted verses. And it was such a beautiful reminder that if I'm everything to everyone but not anything to him, I lose. And it's good for us to sit there for a second. Because I'm not Jesus, you're not Jesus. We are to reflect Jesus, especially those closest to us. We're reflectors and not flashlights. In just a few minutes, we're going to go completely dark in here. There's your warning. I'm just going to do an illustration. That's it. It says in 2 Corinthians 4:7, we now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like what? Okay, we're going to try that again. We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like what? Okay, look to your partner. Look to your person sitting beside you and say, you're not my partner, number one, unless they are. And then say this, you're fragile. Okay, I got to hear that. You look to the person left or right and say, you're fragile. If you're old and you watch Christmas Story, you can say you're fragile. Okay? You are fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from what? God. You know why we are dying of thirst sometimes as followers of Jesus is because we're trying to manufacture our own water. And it doesn't happen. We have to grow and gain from the flowing water, the well that never runs dry, and in reminding ourselves not how much we know, but how much He knows us and how much He loves us and who He says we are. Look at this. Can we go dark now completely? For a long time, I thought my journey of a follower of Jesus and was to point, and I'll go to the dim, to point people out. Hey, you need Jesus. You need Jesus, and this is how you need Jesus. You know all those things you're doing wrong? If you'll just stop it, guess what? You know what? Hey, you can be set free, but you've got to do this. Oh, the person back there. Oh, up there. Yeah, we got to. No, it's not that. Why? Because I'm the one that's pointing. I'm the one that tries to maintain the flashlight and make sure that I'm trying to do everything that God wants me to do. And I become very busy. In reality, all we need to do, let me get it back on the brighter one because it will be much better like that, sweetie. Okay. And in reality, what we are called to do is what? Reflect. Everywhere I go, I'm reflecting. If that's watching a game, if that's going to work, if that's going to class, I'm living for Jesus. I'm not having to manufacture fruit. What I'm doing is living out. Those people that it's hard to live with sometimes, I'm forgiving them. I'm reflecting Jesus. Those people that maybe in my life that have caused pain and wanting the best for them, I'm reflecting. Reconciling, restoring relationships, and just showing up and caring. You can turn the lights on. We are called to reflect. We are not the flashlights. We are the reflectors. Let me ask you a personal question. Are you more apt to shine your own light towards others? Are you more in reflecting Jesus? For a long time, I had gone out in and out of the flashlight mode. If my quiet time is long enough, then I have enough to shine for. Man, if I get to the end of the day and I'm wiped out, must be because I didn't pray enough or I didn't have long enough time in quiet time. I'm His child. You don't stop being His child. Don't live in an economy. God's economy is not the more you put in, the more you get. That's our economy sometimes. But His economy is sitting in. Last week we talked about being seated with Christ, seating in who we are. Whether we have the best quiet time forever or we skipped quiet time. Whether we're struggling with some sin or whether we're floating on air because everything seems to be going okay. You don't stop being His child. And when the moment we put the flashlight down and live in being a reflector, you're going to find a lot of peace and freedom. You mean I don't have to perform to get people into the kingdom? No, you just have to reflect. Look at this. Number 2, God is a creative God. Then He spit on the ground and made mud. Anybody want to have a discipleship opportunity? You want to come up here for a second? I have some mud that I can be like Jesus, right? No, I'm joking. I knew that's good. God is a creative God. Then He spit on the ground, made mud with His saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, go wash yourself. Can you imagine being this blind man? Like, okay, finally, you've heard of Jesus. There's a proof, and you can be able to see that he probably knew or heard of Jesus before because of the interaction. So he's like, finally, this Jesus is going to help me. And so Jesus walks up to him. It's like, yes, I want to see. Yes, I need help. And Jesus starts spitting on the ground, making mud and sticking it in his eyes. You're like, okay, this isn't going to work. But look at verse 7. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool. See, some of us this morning need healing, but we're not washing. And it's not baptism. It's responding to the message and the voice of Jesus. He's saying, you have mud in your eyes. You have come in contact with me, but now I'm asking you to obey me and give up your life for my sake. Because that's when you'll find it. And he did it, and he found sight. God is a creative God. If you know me, I love what just happened. And right after first service, kids always have access to my office. I have a lot of suckers in there, so I bribe them. Not really. Hopefully they like coming. But they can come in. And so I was meeting with a couple, pretty intense meeting. And these two little girls stayed outside of my office, continued to stay outside of my office, continued to stay outside of my office because they know, you know what? Pastor John PJ is going to come talk to us. I don't care who's in that room. There is no way, no how I'm anywhere close to who God is. But that's how he is with us. You're important to him. You're important. There's nothing too busy. He's not too busy. You're not too bad. And God's a creative God. And the reason I went there is because we've got to remember that God works in amazing ways. And when I went out and hugged those two little girls, their parents were there, it reminded me, when I walked back in the door, the simple faith of a child. And so when I sat down and started talking to these two folks again, I went in with that creative God using those two little girls to speak over me. God's a creative God. You know how I came to know Jesus? I was watching the Smurfs on Friday morning or Saturday morning. And God put in my heart, there was an emptiness. I went to my mom and I said, hey, again, I need to give my life to Jesus. She's like, let's get in the car and go talk to my dad, my grandfather. And we went down there. Before we went inside the house, my mom said, why did Jesus die on the cross for you? I'm like, I don't know. She's like, oh, you didn't answer it correctly. But God was working in my heart and my life. And it began a process of learning and loving Jesus. And my mom was the person that led me. I went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. But my mom is the one who led me to Jesus. God's a creative God. Why did he use the dirt? We don't know. Maybe it's because we were from dust and he used dust to fix us. Or maybe it was to show the religious that, you know what? Not only am I healing on the Sabbath, let me show you what I can do on the Sabbath with the ordinary. Many times we make it complicated, don't we? Which reminds us to keep it simple. Keep it simple. Use the everyday to talk about Jesus. Isn't it weird how we do it? We're like, okay. All right, what's going on? I'm about to go talk to my friend about Jesus. Can you pray for me? What if he becomes part of your everyday conversation? As you're talking about a friend, as he says we are, but look at this, we need to keep it simple. Why? He told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes. That's so funny. To the pool. He says, go to the pool, wash yourself. So I went and washed. Listen to this. A person with an experience of God is never at the mercy of a person with only an argument. I want to say that again. A person with an experience of God is never at the mercy of a person with only an argument. So what do you mean, PJ? I mean, share your story. When I'm sitting with a couple and they're going through all kinds of heck in their life, I don't go and sit and stand on a higher platform and say, be like me, I'm perfect. No, I'm like, you know what? The only reason Christy's married to me is not because I'm a good husband, it's because she loves Jesus too much. Because I've given her reasons to jet in the flesh. And it's personal stories that remind us that we are broken, and the only power of the light that shines from us is the source of Jesus Christ doing it. But we try to make ourselves smart and intelligent, and we need to have those conversations. But it's not going to be as powerful as your testimony of what Jesus is doing in your life. Number 4, be patient in the process. Paul says this, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but it was God who made it grow. Be patient in the process. Isn't it funny? We're like, hey, I want to pray for my friend to come to Jesus by Tuesday. And Jesus is like, well, Have you perfected your walk with me? You won't. But why hold a bar to someone else that maybe I'm not holding to you? God is at work. This is a powerful verse, 1 Corinthians 3:6, because it reminds us that we're part of the process, not we're a means to the end. We're not the end. We are not responsible for saving someone. We did not go to the cross. 2 points I have for us here is men's conference. Renee is this guy that is comes to first service. He was here this morning, so I was able to pick on him more, but in a good way. We meet every week. He was in LA. He knew people that I would be afraid to even mention their names. I don't know their names, but he was rough. And he came to this church, and he said he was going to give Jesus 2 months to 3 months, whatever it was. And then that was it, because he knew that people had a tendency to walk out. So he's going to give him a couple of months because everyone else walked out of his life. Well, see, Sean Whiteley, which he and I went to high school together, he took him to a men's conference after about 4 or 5 months of Renee, or even longer of Renee being here. And guess what happened? He surrendered his life to Jesus. And I don't know if you're like me sometimes, but I'm like, are you kidding me, God? I was like meeting him every week. We were in the Word together, and I was like, why didn't I get that experience? Maybe it'd have been about you, John. I don't know. But he came into a relationship after coming here and meeting with people and interacting with people. It's God's timing. It's God's timing. Brian Hastings is another one. Brian Hastings lives in Houston, Texas today, and he makes rods and reels. He makes the rod. They design their own rods. And if you're a fisherman here, that's awesome, right, I guess? But Zebka always worked for me, and that little one that just, anyway. But you can pay way too much money to get a rod that will help you catch fish. But the cool thing about Brian is when we were in Colorado, we were about to go to a church camp, a youth camp, and Christy, I remember being in the bedroom, and Christy's like, hey, is Brian going to go with us? And I said, he said he couldn't, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, calls him. Hey, Brian, we're about to leave. When? About tomorrow morning. And it's like 12 o'clock at night. Be at the church at 7. Brian's like, okay. And so I was like, oh my gosh. Brian is one of those kids that like, you just hope they don't, you pray for them to show up, but you hope they don't. Because somehow it changes the complete DNA of the group. Again, I forgot God was trying to do as much in me as he was those kids, the students. So Brian shows up. And Christy and I were in the back of the room one night. It was in Glorieta, New Mexico. And Ken Freeman, was it Ken that was speaking? And all of a sudden, Brian broke. He took off the world of religion. He grew up in the church. He took off the world of expectation. He took off the world of mess-ups. He took off the world of not being good enough or not measuring up to others or thinking like them or responding like them. And he surrendered his life to Jesus. It's his, God's, to grow. Be patient. Number 5, ignore the voices. If the world hates you, Jesus reminds us that it hated him first. If you're hated or people talk about you for loving or living or reflecting the light of Christ in the way that you do, you're in good company. Ephesians 6:12 says this, for we are not fighting against flesh and blood, enemies. We're not. But against evil rulers and authorities in the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. There is a spiritual warfare going on. I chuckle now. People come in the room and they're like, I'm so mad. I'm like, really? Didn't know. I'm so mad. It's like, yeah? I'm mad at Satan. Yeah? Yeah. If I was in a boxing match with him, I would slam his head into the side. I'm like, no, you wouldn't. He would have you eating cupcakes from his hand, and he would be your best friend. Why? Because he's subtle. He's subtle. He'll tell you what you want to hear and lead you to the place where you'll find death and then laugh at you as he leaves. It's not because of our strength. When we battle the spiritual side of this world, it's because of Jesus. Greater is he that's in me than he's that's in the world. So if you think about that difficult person, there's a bigger battle going on. There is a greater battle going on than just that person. There's a spiritual battle going on. You got to ignore the voices. Number 6, beware of this tendency. Beware of this tendency. It is much easier to discuss a subject like sin than to journey with others in a specific need in the life of a person. Again, it is much easier to discuss a subject like sin than to journey with others in a specific need in the life of a person. And this is what I'm talking about. If you'll go back to John chapter 9, look at this. John chapter 9, verse 1. As Jesus was walking along. Can I just tell you the way that I mess it up sometimes? I don't do what he did. As Jesus was walking along, he what? Do you see? Do I see? But he says he saw a man who had been born blind from birth. Rabbi, again, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own interest or his parents' interests or his parents' sins? Guys, do you see the sin and not the creation of God? Not everyone's a child of God. To become a child of God, you have to surrender your life and say, Jesus, you have taken my place. I don't know how it all works, but by faith, God, I believe you do love me, and I'm giving my life up. That's you become a child of God. We're all creations of God. When you look at the stars at night, do you point out their blemishes or just rejoice because what they look like? So many times, guys, there's sins that we elevate and we miss the whole creature and the creation that stands before us. And the disciples did it. And Jesus says, hey, it's not because of his sins or his parents' sins. Jesus says, this happened so the power of God could be seen in him. That very person that you have isolated or you've only given 3 chances to fix themselves and to make themselves more approved by you, God is doing a work that he wants to touch and change their life in his timing, not your timing, not our tendencies, not as a flashlight, but as a reflector, not to make ourselves feel better, but to glorify God and to keeping it simple. Today, to the worshiper, and this will make sense in just a second. Are you reflecting Jesus? Are you reflecting Jesus? Are you more like I was, a flashlight, pointing out? Who is the person in your life? Christy and I, we talked about this morning on the way into church, about 6:30 a.m. We're seeing God do a work in a person's life. You know how long we've been in their life? Me? 25 years. And we're seeing God do some cool things. Who is the person in your life? How are you reflecting Jesus? What is your struggle? Do you have a tendency to see the sin? Do you want God to work on your timing? Do you feel like you have to get smarter before you can share your story? Are you worried about what people think when the God of the universe says that you're beautiful, you're perfectly put together, and he has a plan for you? What is your struggle? Today, when you leave, you're going to get a little Jesus. Hopefully you got a lot of Jesus. If we go to that last slide, it says, to the worshiper. Am I reflecting my Jesus? Yeah, you're going to get one of those. For those that hurry and care more about themselves than anyone else, there are purple Jesuses with their little, whatever, the toga thing. But there's purple as well, so you can get one to support Tarleton and Jesus at the same time. You probably could sell it outside too if we ran out of the purple ones, but don't try that. But are you reflecting Jesus? So as you go today and you go back to your place, it's already become a nightmare here because I'm seeing little Jesuses pop up all over my office. Ha, ha, ha. And it wasn't the kids, it was an adult. But take this little Jesus with you and put it in a place that you're a reminder, okay? It's a reminder. I'm to reflect this Jesus, not to try to be this Jesus. And it's also good to say, okay, Jesus, what is going on in my life? How do I need to surrender more to you? What am I still trying to hold on to? Am I trying to win the approval of men still, or do I really care what you think? And if I do, why am I still trying to achieve something you've already said I have? To the worshiper. But I want to go back to those that have never worshiped Jesus before. And you're like, oh, new people? No, not necessarily. In verse 34, chapter 9, it says this, you were born a total sinner. This is what the crowd told this guy. They answered, are you trying to teach us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. Look what Jesus does. Verse 35. When Jesus heard what had happened. When Jesus heard what had happened, he what? Found the man. There's some people in your life today that maybe you need to reflect Jesus by going and finding them. And just say, hey, I'm sorry that we've disconnected over the couple of months or whatever. Or, hey, you know what? I haven't been a good example. Just say this, I'm a better flashlight than I am a reflector. They're like, what? But when Jesus heard what had happened, he found the man and asked, do you believe in the Son of Man? The Son of Man was that terminology that Jesus used to say, okay, hey, just as man brought sin into the world, the Son of Man is redeeming and fixing everything that was broken. The man answered in verse 36, who is he, sir? I want to believe in him. Look at verse 37. Not great theology. He says this, you've seen him, Jesus said, and he is speaking to you. Look what happens in verse 38. Yes, Lord, I believe, the man said, and then he what? This is what I think maybe is going on sometimes in churches. After being in them churches way too long, but I do love it. There's some of you today, potentially, that have never truly worshiped Jesus. Why? Because you've tried to win the approval by being good, or you've tried to win the approval by doing what people say you should do, or wearing this, or not doing this, or not watching that rated movie, or just, just being a part of the crowd, just showing up because then God's going to be happy that I came. No, he wants you as his child. And some of us may be walking around with mud in our eyes, thinking we've had an experience with Jesus, and when Jesus says, no, I want all of you, just not an experience. So today, this is the challenge. If you've never given your life over to Jesus, you know what that looks like? This is what it looks like. And the older I get, the more simple it is. Everything that God has said about you is true. You're like, okay, that'll take a couple of 100 years to figure that out. No, it won't. You and I are messed up. We're separated. And by faith, you're accepting what God says you are, but what he has done. And you know what? Today may be that step that you receive it, and in 2 months from now, you're going to understand it more. So today, may you come up, and maybe you come up here and find someone and say, hey, I want to worship Jesus for the first time. And then we're going to pray with you. We're not going to ask you 400 questions to make sure that you know who you're worshiping. We're going to trust God with the outcome. Number 2, for us that are already been worshiping Jesus, maybe come up here. Maybe grab some friends. Say, hey, I want you to encourage me. I want you to speak truth in my life. I want you to keep telling me, helping me reflect Jesus in a greater way, and get together and do this life and the rub together where we're able to show others how great He is. Not in our perfection, but in His purpose, in being who He says, as followers of Christ, we already are. So God, I want to pray for this moment.
Thank you for checking out Timber Ridge Church here on YouTube. If you would like to see a previous message, click here. If you would like to stay up to date with all things TRC, subscribe here.